Hey everyone, welcome back to the Shared Housing course by the Normalized Money Project and brought to you by Katie's House Foundation as well. Today is a very exciting day because as a mortgage underwriter, we are going to underwrite a property address. I'm going to show you what Katie's House Foundation looks for when we look to either lease a property and arbitrage it, or if we look to acquire it through creative financing or a joint venture. I will tell you right now that we have had so many addresses being emailed to us that this is probably one of the more important classes for you guys to understand the checklist, the attributes, some of the notes, and then also the Excel spreadsheets. And so we'll try and cover as much as we can in the next hour. And then I would encourage you to get really familiar with how to do your own analysis of a property. However, if you would like for someone on one of our teams and in one of my companies to help do that analysis for you, we have rolled out shared housing consulting and then also doing some of the analytics. It's $65 for 30 minutes, and you can schedule that, based on how much time you're estimating for whatever it is that you might need. That can be on a subscription basis. So if you know that you're definitely going to go down this path, or after you take this series of 12 hours plus the homework, you start going down this path and you want to have a consultant who you can call. You can, sign up for a couple hours each month. That way you have somebody available to you. So that would be Julie and JJ and Kristen and myself and, even our property manager and things like that. So anyhow, let me jump into the meat and potatoes of today. Really quick, before we move forward with the course, I need to show you this disclaimer. So I'm going to make it a lot bigger. And I'm not going to read this to you. However, essentially, I'll read a few sentences. All information contained in these series or classes, documents, or worksheets, the materials, are provided to you for informational purposes only. The information contained herein is confidential information regarding a potential investment in your own shared housing operation or the operation of a joint venture, and the materials are brought to you by the Normalized Money Project, Inc., a California corporation, through private educational courses presented by its executive, Kirsten Vanderjack, the manager. No person has been authorized to make any statement concerning these materials other than has been set forth herein. You accept to keep these materials confidential. And then two other things I'm going to read, but then you can read the rest yourself. So I do want to let you know that the information contained herein must be kept strictly confidential and may not be used, reproduced, or redistributed in any format or for any purpose without the manager's express written authorization. If you have purchased the materials for $1,499.99, so about $1,500 or more, you are allowed to use the materials for your personal use only and not in any commercial or shared capacity. And then in addition to, we do want to let you know that the information contained in these materials are not and may not be relied on in any manner as legal, tax, or investment advice, or as an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer. So as we get into a lot of confidential proprietary information, it was necessary for me to read you this disclaimer. And, I know that you are going to do great because you're probably a high-level real estate investor if you're taking this class. And so you've, read these disclaimers probably more times than we can count, right? So moving on now, let's jump into this attributes of a great shared house and house analysis. So I like to go ahead and print this out when I am looking at a property address. And so this pro tip here says that unless you have no mortgage or a grant that covers all of your expenses plus your target monthly profit, you should analyze a property for the below attributes. A property analysis should take 3 to 5 hours. We can do this for you for $65 per half hour. And so this checklist has 30 items. Excuse me. Then a few notes. And so we're going to want to go through these 30 items here. And it does require you to make a couple phone calls, pull a property profile, confirm the numbers of bedrooms and bathrooms, and things of that nature. And so let's go ahead and get started with a property that was near an analysis that I did for a real estate investor who specializes in foreclosures. I looked at a few properties recently for him. And so I just went right down the street because I actually really did like this neighborhood for a couple different reasons. And so we'll get into different neighborhoods and different areas throughout the United States where you can find some of these houses. So that way, if you're doing wholesaling or some type of solicitation, then you can focus and get more comfortable in those area codes. So the address that I'm going to use is 11925 Euclid Court Northeast in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87112. I'm going to invite you just to follow along with me. And so this document will be part of your documents for this class, of course, so you will have a copy of it now. Please don't go giving it out to people, because that is what makes it special, is that people will come to you. And of course your team, and so we want them to offer you, a partnership essentially. So that way you guys can do very well in your operation. But so, I like to take this, of course, and just go ahead and add the property address. So 11925 Euclid Court Northeast. I'm just going to put that, New Mexico, 87112. And so what I like to do is I actually like to pull the property profile, being that I'm a licensed real estate agent. And also I used to be a title rep for a minute because I wanted to learn about how to get title leads and foreclosure leads and all kinds of leads. So what I do is I normally log in to my system and I will pull the title profile, and I'm looking for things like the property taxes. I want to verify the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. I also want to look at the square footage of the property, the square footage of the lot, and things of that nature. If you're doing a wholesale deal or another kind of deal, it's also kind of nice to see, what their liens are on the property. And certainly if you're making offers, you should know what their liens are, or if they're in foreclosure for leverage purposes. So I am just going to go ahead and, I already did some analysis of this area. So if I were to pull the property profile, it's likely a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and it's probably around 1,700 square feet. So now if there was a recent renovation, that's really important. There's no way for, someone to know that there was a recent renovation unless you know that and you share that with them. So if you ask somebody else to look at a property address for you, make sure that you share these recent renovations, because it could look like it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and then we find out that it's maybe a 5-bedroom, 3-bath now. And so that's going to be really important, is the number of bedrooms, so that way you can make more money. And so when we hear something like it's a 2-1 or a 3-2, then, really we're going to be hoping that you have an established partnership with somebody like a grant manager, either through your existing operation because you already have a large house, and now you're just getting more houses, added to that. And so a 3-bedroom, 2-bath might not be bad depending on what your numbers are. So anyhow, double check for recent renovations, is a really important thing. So for right now, I'm going to actually put that this is, I guess for my scenario that I'm going to go in the numbers, I'm actually going to put that this is a 6 bedroom, 6 bed, 2 bath. And just do it like this. 662, and square feet, I'll put 2,000. So we just recently sold a house that was like that. It was actually a 6.3. So in any case, 2 or 3 bathrooms. Um, all right. So what I'm finally going with on this scenario is a 6 bedroom, 3 bath, 2,000 square feet on the house. And then the yard, let's use 7,000. This is very similar to a house that we flipped. So, and title would show that this house is a 4.2 or a 4.3 actually. Is what it would have shown. So moving forward with this, what we're looking for here, number one is going to be, right, we already talked about a 4 bedroom, 2 bath, or a 1.75. So you at least have 2 functioning showers, 1,600 square feet. And then a backyard. So moving on to number 2, and a front yard or porches and balconies. And so just think about, what would you want to live in, right? You want to have some space to go out on the front yard, the backyard. If you have a balcony, that's great. You want to have porches. So, taking people and giving them a different way about their housing changes the way that they will go about their life. You have to remember that what we talked about, one of the 5 truths in shared housing, is that a person that would normally afford or need to live in a 1 bedroom in maybe a war zone or a C-class neighborhood, if they want to have a different life experience, or if they need to because of affordability reasons, they can live in a B-class neighborhood and share a bedroom in a beautiful house, or even, have the one room to themselves and still have this beautiful house and split all the utilities. And what they're really hoping for is not a commercial enterprise, an apartment, but instead a single family house or maybe a 2 unit with a yard. And, the lot here we have at 7,000 square feet. So just keep that in mind. If we are going to go actually over a commercial cash flow worksheet, and then also a residential one that really is specific about the weekly rents. But keep that in mind, because some people I know want to do tiny house villages, which actually would be really wonderful too. But there are different things to consider in every kind of model. And so as we will go through the courses, we need to discuss those, the type of individual who might live inside one of those places. So for example, if you have a tiny house community, and there's only one person in every house, they can self-isolate. Whereas if you have a shared house, and you have, let's say, 8 people in a 4 bedroom or 10 people in a 5 bedroom, they don't have the opportunity to self-isolate and to utilize, they can't shoot up drugs if they're sharing a bedroom with someone or if there's other people in the house. But if you put them into a tiny house, which, then they can, because nobody's in there with them. And we know that humans are really social animals. So I love shared housing for that reason. But of course, any kind of housing that can be done to help people that is clean and safe and affordable for them, and then also for the investor or the government, is what we're trying to accomplish. It's just, I know that there are some low income apartments that are being built. And what happens is that they fund those, and an apartment is literally built, and it might be in a bad neighborhood. It might even be in a great neighborhood. But when you have 40 people and you take them off the streets and you put them into an apartment building, I can already tell you that even if they were screened when they were let into that apartment building, they're going to let in other people who were not screened. And I was even reading about a story where there's a woman who walks around with a hatchet in one of those apartments, and people are scared to come out of their apartments because the people who live there, half of them don't do drugs, and they were in a tough spot, and it was an affordability issue. And the other half do drugs, and it was an affordability issue as well. And they don't care to follow the rules. And the property manager, for safety reasons, doesn't want to go into the building. And the police aren't able to find this woman with a hatchet whenever they pop on by. So these are the kinds of things that really need to be considered when we talk about the government and taxpayer money going to put up large commercial complexes. The same thing would go for a tiny house village. So what are the controls that are going to be in place to make sure that the environment stays safe? Because I'll tell you, even if you hire people who have a background in property management, they need caseworkers, they need police officers. If you can't go to your own property because there is opioids and needles and guns, and you even get a building, right? I mean, this is why people don't want these buildings in these tiny house communities in the A and B class neighborhoods, in my opinion, is because it's a commercial type of a situation. If it's a single family, normally you could have one person oversee 10 other people. That's kind of business management for you. And the same thing goes here. So if you have a 6-bedroom and one of the bedrooms, and it could just be a dining room, let's call it. So you take the dining room and you assign that to a house manager. We call him a house president at this point. And they're volunteers for the foundation. It looks good on their resume, and they still pay rent, but essentially they have their own separate private space, and they report to the foundation to help us out. And normally there's somebody who likes to make sure that things are perfect anyways, like, oh, the fridge is broken. It's maybe somebody who, they just bring everything to your attention, and we see that as a benefit, of course. But so if then you have, let's call it a 5-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house, and then you finish off the garage or a basement, that can turn into another bedroom. And with 2 beds in a room, then you would have 10 people plus a house manager. And so the property manager who gets assigned to that property, they don't live there. That's a normal property manager. They can coordinate with the house president. Excuse me, I have a tickle on my nose. They can coordinate with the house president. And so that is kind of the way to control a pulse, or at least to know what kind of pulse is going on. And, again, because people can't hide in a commercial hallway back behind and do drugs, or if they are found with drugs in a house environment, the police can be called and find them very quickly, very easily. The security systems can be changed on the house for getting in and out, and then also for walking around inside the house. And so it's much easier to control the health and safety of a single family residence. And then also the long-term results are better, short-term and long-term, for the people that are living there. So this is why we adopted this model. Of course, there are lots of single family residences that are available. And so let's just keep on keeping on here. Number 3, we talked about just right now, a fifth living area, such as a formal dining room, which can be sectioned off, a second living room, or a finished garage that can be used for the house president. So we're always looking for extra spaces when we are looking at houses. So 5-bedroom areas, 10 beds, plus a private area for the house president's room is ideal. Bedroom areas need to be 10 by 10 on the square footage for 2 single beds, or 5 by 10 for a single bed. Each space inside of that should fit a single bed, a nightstand, and a smaller dresser if possible, plus a shared closet. So this is only things, these things can only be checked off on the list if you have a floor plan, so you need a sketch, which if you've gone to the house, you can use any of the apps that are available, and you can make sure that the rooms are the right size, or a good old tape measure, of course. Normally an appraisal, a past appraisal, will have some of this stuff too, so you could always ask for it. And so when we do an analysis for you, or one of our team members, we need this information to be provided to us, maybe a video walkthrough as well, right? Up, down, we need to take a look at what's going on. Okay, so number 7, be careful of Jack and Jill bathrooms, as typically they must be shared by the adjoining rooms. So if you have a co-ed house and you have a bathroom in the middle of the house and then the 2 bedrooms there, that bathroom would be assigned to the adjacent rooms. Codes will not allow for people to walk through a bedroom to get to a bathroom. Now, even if it was all men or all women in a house, you still can't have people walking through their bedroom. They usually lock their doors unless it's sober living. Sober living, you wouldn't want to lock the doors because you wouldn't want people who are fresh out of detox to lock themselves in their rooms. People who are a year out of detox or a year sober, they could lock their room. We'll talk more about sober living and what we have experienced at Katie's House Foundation, and then also in my lifetime, having grown up with, drugs and alcohol. I grew up in houses where, unfortunately, we had people who used methamphetamine, and they did meth and locked themselves in their room and in the garage and in the backyard, and they would tent up and they would have all kinds of mayhem going on. And I was just a kid, probably 10 years old. And I have seen firsthand, all the different things that really should be put in place. And then I have taken training on it. And then I have gone through it in the foundation, and then also with people in recovery who have lived at other houses or managed other houses. And then, of course, talked with the president of NAR, for the state of Alabama, and looked at those guidelines. And so I feel personally pretty comfortable in the sober living space. And we had written all of our policies and procedures up for that. And so anyways, we will do a very special episode just on sober living, because you can make, a good amount of money depending on who you're going to be helping and where they're coming from and how many days sober they are. So moving forward. Okay, so we are talking about Jack and Jill bathrooms, B-class neighborhoods. So when you're looking on Google, essentially you are going to be looking to see if there's no trash in the street. You want to look through the different, years. So if there's Google images for 2022, 2019, 2014, you can get a really good sense of what's been happening over the years on that street. And you can scoot around on Google Images, which is real great. Check it out and see if you can notice any drug dealers in those photos, because they are there on the corners, or there's gangs on the corners over the course of time. And so maybe you're familiar with the area and you can drive around. Um, Also, you can Google and call a few local property managers. So go on Google or Yelp or ask your local RIA or even a Facebook group if they know a property manager in that neighborhood. Give them a ring, ask them if they would service the house. Now, if the property manager normally deals with affluent clients and it's a bad neighborhood, they will tell you they will not service it. It's just perception is reality or reality is reality, and they don't want to go there. So it doesn't mean that it's a bad neighborhood. You can talk to other property managers who grew up in that neighborhood or who are just more comfortable or willing to go to those, B and C class neighborhoods. Certainly, if it's a war zone, you don't want to do any work there because you're not actually lifting up the residents and they'll be too scared to go outside, you know, or you would have break-ins and all kinds of stuff that you don't want. So, call several property managers. Make sure you know what kind of clientele they like to deal with, and then ask them if they would be your property manager on this address as a midterm rental. And that's it. And if they say, yeah, sure, no problem, then that's good. Ask them about the neighborhood. What do you think of this neighborhood? Um, is it okay if I park a rental car outside of the house? Or would I need to drive, something that didn't look like a shiny object that's going to get broken into? Um, I'm not sure if you guys deal in these kinds of neighborhoods. So, anyhow, it's just we'll have Julie on and she can talk about all this kind of stuff. But basically, a B class neighborhood, you should not have any issues. Maybe you might have break-ins, but that happens everywhere, even in A class neighborhoods, which is why on here you're going to see that we talk about motion detector lights because Julie recommends, and she's a retired police officer, of course, if you watch our YouTube channel at Katie's House Foundation. And she does the crime analysis for these houses when we ask her to. She recommends that every house, no matter the class of neighborhood or the block, has the motion light detectors around all of the sides. That helps a lot, even in the really nice neighborhoods. Okay. So we are talking about number 10. Is it a single family, or if it's a duplex, or maybe even a fourplex? Is it in a single family dominated neighborhood? Another thing that's not on here, I don't think it's a hard and fast, but if you can tell or if you're aware that some of the people are renters and others are owners, then that's kind of nice too. Also the age group. So I would say between the ages of 30 and 50 would be good, 25 to even 60. But essentially, you're not looking again for like just a neighborhood that's really for people over the age of 55, unless of course you're doing elderly housing. So just make sure that you have a good, variation in what's happening there, or lean on the conservative side. And if most of the people own in that area, that's fine too. Because your facility or your house, really no one should know that that's a shared house. It could just be a large family living there. No big deal. But you don't want a whole bunch of teenagers running around and breaking windows, right? So, which would also happen in certain neighborhoods regardless. All right, just trying to save you on insurance claims here and some other things. All right, so number 11, unlimited street parking and single story when possible, up to 1 mile to a working bus line. So make sure that the people that live in the house can walk to a working bus line. You can see if it's working, or you can call and ask if it's working, but some cities are notorious for having bus stops and there's no bus that goes because they're having transportation issues, or right, you can look up whoever the bus line is and find out if they are on strike all the time. So these are the kinds of things to consider. Now on Google, it'll tell you when the next bus pickup is. So when you Google a house and you look at the images and then you look to see where the transportation is, it'll actually tell you. And so that's a good indication that the bus line is running. You don't want the bus stop right outside the front door, because then people can just be getting off, right? Transient people, and that's never a great thing. But if it was, a couple houses down, and the house in that case was not for people who immediately got out of detox, that might work. Up to 2 miles to walk to a store for milk and bread. Again, you don't want the store right outside the front door because of the traffic. And number 14, you want work and medical to be accessed by foot within 3 miles or via the bus stop. And so I can tell you personally that, when somebody goes to jail and then they get out and they go into sober living, they're willing to take the bus wherever they need to go if they're committed to staying sober. But just generally speaking, if you're dealing with human trafficking or, battered women, or just anyone who doesn't have a car, because they either got their car taken away, impounded, broken down, driver's license suspended, just, the whole gamut of people, they need to be able to walk to work, or walk to the store, or walk to the bus stop, and then, get to where they need to go, and they will work out their own bus lines. So if the house is out in the country, that is not going to be a good house, just letting you know right now. If there's no transportation, it's not going to work. So number 15, if there is no public transportation nearby, the residents will need cars or facility transportation upcharge. And so what this means is that, in some cities, let's say that they do have an opioid addiction problem, which this is a lot of cities. Maybe they are out in the country, they have a population of 20,000 or 30,000, and the public transportation is lacking. Well, if you want to do sober living, then in those cases, you might need to have a van at the house that belongs to either someone who lives there, and then you bring them in the fold as a 1099 and have coverage on that van, and you pay them for mileage or something. But basically, there are many cases in the sober living arena where the people need to be shuttled, even in cities, quite frankly, because they are just at a point in their lives that, they need to be shuttled to their IOP, which is their outpatient program, which is a doctor or therapy outside the house. And so in order to get people where they need to go, you can charge a lot more for entry. So you might charge $2,000 non-refundable just for them to come into the house. That's it. So if you have 10 people, that's all the money that comes to you up front, but you take that money and you have to pay to own a van or lease a van. And as the people come and go if they only stay with you for 30 days or 6 months, then that money keeps coming into you. And so that's what this transportation upcharge means, is that you need to really pay attention to transportation, unless the people that you are going to deal with have their own cars. So transportation is really important. Otherwise, even if they work from home. So we always look for those bus stops. All right. Or, again, We just ask them, do you have a car? Do you have a driver's license? And that makes it real easy, you know. Okay, so for sober living, Lyft provides free rides for 3 weeks to jobs and medical care in some cities. Give Lyft a call and ask if they do it in that city. Sometimes the cities give out free bus passes too. Number 17, make sure that when you're looking at a house, you check all the windows. They shouldn't be painted shut. If you have the house rehabbed, make sure that you tell the contractors, do not paint these windows shut. You need to check for an egress from each window. You know, this gets overlooked even with just regular rentals and investing. I worked for an asset manager who is a hedge fund. And I actually dealt with a property in New York that they had house hacked. So they hacked it, you know, into little rooms, and they were putting the little rooms on Airbnb. And so they would take one big room, not that big for New York, and they would just put up, you know, actual walls. And then there was no window, or a window that didn't work. And the people, of course, people who want to live somewhere, a lot of times they will pay and they will just live there and they don't look at health and safety. That property burnt down with people inside of it. And we actually were in the middle of taking that property to foreclosure. And and some of the other people that I worked with, we didn't have any short sale offers on the property. So, you know, it was very sad. My recorded call got pulled. It went to court. And, you know, if you're dealing in older houses, and you're renovating those, that's great. You know, just make sure that people can get out of the house, because these houses do burn down. And also, people who are cold will start fires inside their house, with like the little heaters, right? That they bring into their rooms that they shouldn't. And so these are the kinds of things that, again, we have to talk about. And so you might be thinking like, oh, wow, there's a lot to consider. And the truth is that right now we're looking at a lot of information to consider. But really, it's the same stuff that you and your family consider. You consider this when you buy a house for yourself, right? Absolutely. Can my kids or my husband and I or my wife or, you know, can anyone who's staying with us get out this window or this door? So it's the same thing, but now you're just having to make sure. So number 18, at least 2 exits in the house. So front door and a back door. And then windows that open, or you can put glass breaks, which is what I've had to do. On one house is basically you just buy the little stickies with a hook, and then you hang the glass break on the window. And so that way, if someone needed to, they could break the glass. And then smoke and carbon alarms are standard for most houses, especially if you get a loan. I do know that Airbnb, you know, had something with somebody dying with carbon, or like a couple people died in one of the Airbnbs because there was no carbon alarm. So that's really important not to neglect that. Okay. On the house security system, you can actually put in these kinds of alarms that are tied into SimpliSafe. And so I know that SimpliSafe, when those alarms go off, they instantly call, you know, the fire department to come and check. So instead of like even calling you, they do call you, but they call them first. And so that's important. You know, when you have someone who's drunk, who cooks with too high of heat or uses like a turkey fryer, which they shouldn't have, you know, these are the things you don't want your house burned down. Also, if you reno a house, make sure you increase your coverage. Make sure you look to see that you're over insuring, because a lot of it only covers 80%. Number 20. So a kitchen plus a nook A lot of times there's like a breakfast nook um, with enough room for 2 refrigerators, a dishwasher, and a microwave. So initially, you might only need 1 refrigerator, and then as you have 4 people living there, they can get by with putting a few days worth of items. But then as you have 8 people or 10 people, you need another refrigerator. You have to let them know that they can only have a few days worth of food, or hopefully that'll work itself out inside the house. The dishwasher is to make sure that people are sanitizing the dishes, so that way something like COVID doesn't spread, as easily, or even the flu. Um, and then a microwave, of course. And so if your kitchen is small, then maybe you have another area in the house where you can set up like a kitchenette. And so, or a nook, of course, where you can put additional um, cabinets for rice and beans and things of that nature. Number 21 is a living room or space that can fit 10 dining room chairs and a coffee table for meetings or watching TV. And so I'll give you an example. One of the shared houses that we looked at early on was a really nice, I think that was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. Yes. And then they had put up a divider for the dining space. And so what they had was you actually would walk in and the stairs were right there. And over to the left was where they would put, their keys and hang their jackets. And then they had a beautiful Christmas tree. And then they actually had, 10 chairs, just dining room chairs that they probably had picked up or gotten donated to them, sitting in the living room. Of course, I think there was like a nice recliner, but only one. And they had a couple more chairs. So I think they had maybe the recliner and 5 chairs on one side. So that was 6. And they had 4 chairs on the other side underneath the TV, which was up on the wall. And then they had the dining room table. And so you could walk through into the kitchen and out to the back door. And there was 2 bedrooms down there. Or you could also walk to the formal dining space, which had been turned into the house manager's bedroom and office. And so, it's basically to say that even in a house that seems a little tight, you can make it work. And, this house was so beautiful. The girls had done such a good job making it look really, really nice. And, they invited us in. We were able to talk with them and they gave us a tour of their place because they were so proud of it. They were so grateful. And this was in a solid B class neighborhood, about a mile from downtown, in a nice downtown city. And they could go directly to work at Starbucks. And so that was really awesome. It was such a nice house. And so they really did a good job utilizing that living room as their catch-all. And so they could put their mail for everyone right underneath their jackets before they went upstairs. And then they didn't actually have a dining room. They had a kitchen that just a galley kitchen, essentially. They only had 1 refrigerator, and then they turned their dining space, their informal dining space at the back of that kitchen before you'd go out the back door, into where they would have an additional microwave. So if I recall, they had 2 microwaves. Maybe not. Maybe they had a second fridge back there. I'm trying to think back. That room was a little bit dark when we walked through it. But they probably had a second small refrigerator back there. But they had a lot of dry goods back there. And so they actually had a bonfire pit in the back, and they had some chairs donated to them and the fire pit donated so they could go and sit in the back. And so then you would go upstairs and they had 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom upstairs and a bathroom downstairs. That was a very new house. And, that was a really nice house. And so they make the best, you can make the best of your space is what I'm getting at. Now, the women in that case, right, they would have sober living meetings and they would have games. And so that's the whole purpose of having those chairs. Not that people really watch a lot of TV because they can watch it on their phone in their bedroom. But if they want to have like a group night where pizza is ordered in and have pizza or make ornaments or something, that's why it's nice to have a space like that. Number 22, if there's an upstairs, is there room for a kitchenette? So just something to be mindful of. So that way maybe you could put some dry goods up there, but not in the bedrooms. Number 3, try and avoid pools. You could fill them in. I suppose that's completely up to you. But I don't think people are really going to use them in this scenario for this type of housing. Best to cut any trees that could be dangerous. So definitely take a look at any dangers. If you have big trees hanging over the house, you don't want them to fall on the house and somebody to get hurt. Is the basement secure and are there lights on the house or could there be motion lights? So this is just saying, when somebody needs to exit, so when you evict somebody from a house, they might come back. And that just goes for any type of investment property. I know my cousin was just dealing with, he's in San Diego. He is an apartment manager. I think that one is in La Jolla. And they had someone cooking meth on a first floor. I'm sorry, on a second floor apartment. And they ended up finding their children in there and all kinds of things going on. And they evicted them, locked the door, did everything, saved the kids. Well, had to put them in foster care. But, those people, even though they were locked out and on the second floor, they apparently climbed the building and tried to break in the window because they had been gone a few days. And of course, I don't know, maybe they needed to come back and check on the kids. But all I'm saying is that, right, make sure that your house is secure. And I would recommend putting motion lights. Is there any storage space? Oh, no. Number 26. 25. Is there any storage space via a basement or shed? It's not necessary, but it's good to know. So if there happens to be an extra shed outside, check on the inside, see if it's usable. That's awesome. People shouldn't be bringing that much to your shared house. They're not supposed to just, move in with a ton of stuff. It's a temporary house. And so we tell them to just come with clothes, maybe just 7 days worth of clothes and 2 pairs of shoes. We'll go over the what to bring and what not to bring in the course material as the classes progress. So dry goods, number 26. So you need a spot, we already talked about this, where they can store their dry goods, enough for a few days worth of food at a time, because of course they go shopping. And so we'll also talk about assigning spaces if you want to. A lot of times they can just work it out themselves. Shouldn't be an issue. Number 27, HVAC for the entire house. And the temperature is set and then locked off. And so we set our houses to 75 degrees, and then we put a lock over them, so our maintenance crew is the only one that can get into that. And we just let people know that all year round at 75 degrees. They can put on a jacket or they can put on a tank top. Number 28, the year built. So if it's over 20 years old, the year the plumbing updates for the HVAC, the electrical, the plumbing, and the roof. This is really important for insurance purposes. And so, those houses that I was looking at earlier in Albuquerque, I think those were like 1970, but had some reno. And so probably in the last 20 years, they have updated those kinds of things. Number 29, can you put a wheelchair ramp if you need or want to? You don't have to, but you should know. So there are a lot of people who live in houses and they can't even get out of them if they wanted to, for any reason. They just don't have a wheelchair ramp, but they live inside and they're stuck inside anyways. Maybe they only go out once a year because somebody helps them get out of the house because the house is not conducive to that. And so that's a whole nother population that if you wanted to work with people that are wheelchair bound, and you wanted to find houses where there was, an entry point where you could have your maintenance crew for maybe, I think our maintenance crew told us it was $900 for them to build a 30-foot ramp with the handles, or not handles, but the rails. And so this house that we were looking at is particularly conducive to it. And we know there are people that are homeless in wheelchairs sleeping on the floor of the shelters. And, do they want to come out of the shelter and be stuck inside of a house for who knows how long? Or if the house does have something happen like a fire, they can't get out. Those people probably would be more inclined to stay homeless because, what's the worser of the situations? You need to look at the doors and how big the wheelchairs are. And so I think having the door at 32 inches works for most wheelchairs. And then the bathrooms, of course, having a full bathroom. And so these are just things that you can look into. Number 30, is there room for a mail table, self-help flyers, a house computer station, or a Christmas tree? And so those are the niceties. They're optional. But when you have several people, adults living in a house or getting mail, you'll want that house manager to check the mail every day, or at least every couple days, or anyone in the house really, to bring the mail in and put it on the table for everyone to just grab their mail. You could put up, some type of holders to put some flyers in. So, if they needed to go to the food bank, normally people in the house will start creating community type of self-help stuff, or at least they'll know about it. Like, hey, I go to the food bank. So you could ask them, or the property manager could ask them like, hey, why don't you put that flyer up on the wall or the fridge? A computer station, not entirely necessary, but it is good to have if they need to coordinate with, let's say they don't have a cell phone and they're going to college. Maybe they do have a cell phone, but they still need a computer, right, to do homework. And that's a nicety. That's something nice to have a house computer station. But in that house that I referenced earlier, I noticed that the women upstairs on the landing, they had a card table. And so they used that to meet with their probation officers or sponsors. It was kind of like a private spot, even though it was on the landing. It just, it wasn't in the kitchen. It wasn't in the living room. It was just kind of like they knew like, okay, that's where, if you want to have a conversation with somebody, the two of you can sit at the card table upstairs. And then, of course, a Christmas tree. That's nice. Just saying, like, when you're walking around a house, right? Wouldn't it be nice to just know, like, okay, there's a spot here. It's an optional spot for something. All right. So we're already at 53 minutes into this video. And we're just going over really the checklist. So I'm going to call this video number 2. And then on number 3, I'm going to get into the underwriting numbers. So in wrapping up this video and this class, these notes down here are really important. So number 1, same-sex bathrooms are recommended. So even if you have a co-ed house, you would want to have same-sex bathrooms if you could. I'm not sure if the residents would be agreeable to co-ed bathrooms, but these, generally the people don't really know each other until they get to know each other. And so when they move in, they get assigned to a room, a bed, and a bathroom to put their items. And then a closet space, of course, or a dresser, and then kitchen space. So usually it's 6 people allowed to 1 bathroom. And I think that's nationwide, but you would have to look at your state. Co-ed houses are allowed in most cases, pending the special purpose. the insurance, and then your own personal risk tolerance. And so you need to pay attention to that, of course, depending on the population that you're serving. Could it be a co-ed house? We wrestled with this quite a bit at Katie's House Foundation. Ultimately, right now, co-ed is fine. I'm sure there are going to be houses where it's a hard no. And then our particular insurance doesn't address it either way. And we feel like if somebody were to have some kind of sexual harassment or claim, we have policies in place, which we will go over in this training. They are very important for you to have with your volunteers, whether or not your insurance requires it. So that covers, you do that with your employees, your volunteers, and then also, we have our residents sign something when they come in if they want to report a claim. And people are responsible for their own behaviors. So these are part of, having the standard operating procedures, which is why you paid for this class. So that way, as you come into these documents from us, we've taken a lot of hours and been very thoughtful about these policies. And so we are, letting you use those for your personal use and for your personal shared housing. And, you'll need to modify those to your insurance and to your risk tolerance and to whatever kind of special purpose housing that you on your homework yesterday or on class number 1, the homework was to pick your special purpose. And so if that happens to be level 3, sex offenders, those are going to be same-sex houses for sure. And your insurance is going to have some special rules around that. And then in addition to your insurance, your SOPs, you're going to want to modify ours and our templates, and you're going to want to change those to meet your insurance and your risk tolerance. And then you need to, of course, train people out on what that means to your operation in that particular house. Now, if all of your houses are the same, that will be easier for you, because you'll have some momentum going with all these people that are providing you funding and placing people in your houses and then your staff. And so that's what you need to think about. That's why I asked you to just pick one. So that way, if it's, veterans, work really hard on that. If it's something else, please I want you guys to be successful. Number 3, does the cash flow make sense given your debt obligations and single bed market on Craigslist? Add 40% to what's available on Craigslist or what's showing on Craigslist, because if you're dealing with government or nonprofits, those are business to business affiliations. Right? They're not retail like Craigslist. And that's a little bit different than when we acquire houses and, we sell them. But what I'm trying to say is that it's more expensive by 40%, give or take. You're going to have to call in your area with your population and first call your competitors and just ask them what they charge as if you're a client, quite frankly. And if you can get off their website, still give them a call. And then once you know what your competition is charging, and make sure you call 3 or 4 or 5 houses, then you can talk with the people who hand out the grants and the grant managers. And so you should already have a baseline understanding of what people are charging for what kind of risk. But it is riskier to take someone who is 21 days out of detox for heroin or crack cocaine, which is why they would pay so much more, or even the drug court. And so not to say that those people are dangerous. In fact, after 21 days, they're probably doing pretty good, but they need to be put into an environment that's also very good for them. So anyhow, make sure you look at citydata.com for the largest city population. Check out, what other people are paying when you call these, nonprofit and government partnerships, and take a year to really work, your market that you want to be in. That's what number 4 is. It's recommended that your first shared house is within driving distance of your home or work, the nearest largest city, on citydata.com that you focus on building reliable nonprofit and government partnerships for the population that you want to serve for at least 1 year. Focus on that and hire a local property manager. So we are at minute mark 59. I'm going to jump off and I'm going to see you right back on lesson number 3. Talk with you soon.